Hey, I'm JD. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe. Please hit like and please subscribe. So here I've got the Tudor watch I'm working on, the Tudor ladies watch. It's a self-winding watch. It's pretty old. I think it's probably from the 60s perhaps. And I had done work on this watch and had taken off the bridge that has the automatic winding mechanism. And if you saw my previous videos, I worked on the hairspring on this watch and managed to get this hairspring shaped, which was a tough job. So if you're ever shaping a hairspring, you got to be super patient, and you've really got to do this under a stereo microscope. So here I've got it beating away. It's got a pretty strong amplitude right now. It wouldn't be the strongest I could get if I put a brand new hairspring on it, but it is pretty strong. And I got the beat error down to 0.3. And I got the adjustment down to around plus 10, I think. So I'd probably look at that again once I get this installed in the watch and further adjust it once it's installed. So this video I'm going to just show the basic reassembly of the watch from this point onward, and not the full reassembly of the watch, as you folks have probably seen way too many reassemblies of watches. So we're just going to go from this point onward. I've got that in my Myers movement holder, Myers number 58 movement holder, the best movement holder in the world, and I've got two very small clamps on the inside grabbing that watch. So here I've got this Inca block set up here, and I'm just going to remove the jewel on the top here. So the jewel comes with a jewel setting and a cap jewel. So I take both of them out at once. It's very dangerous to just take the cap jewel out on its own. You're likely going to drop it and lose it, so you might as well take them both out. They stick together, so what I use here to do this is a piece of Rodico. So I grab that Rodico and I just dab the Rodico down, and it'll lift the jewel and the cap out just like that. So, and you're okay leaving it run for a while the way it is, no problem. Now I put this jewel down on my mat. I use a kitchen mat for this. Someone asked me what mat do you use? Well, I use a kitchen mat. So here I've got a piece of pegwood, and I've got to sharpen the end of it. I used it for something else before, and I want to get rid of that black grease gum paint, whatever that was in the end, and just sharpen this pegwood because I'm going to need it later on anyway. And I'm going to use the pegwood just to rub the cap jewel to take off any leftover dried oil in that cap jewel. It's super small, so I'm not sure how much effect it has, but I do it anyway just to make sure that cap jewel is clean. And there we go. That stick is as sticky as it gets. It is a one sharp stick. So here I'm taking that jewel and rubbing it and realizing, why the hell am I rubbing this jewel? I haven't even taken off the cap yet. But I'm having a good time rubbing this jewel, and flicking it. So there we go. So I'm just trying to see what the heck I got going here. So a little bit of hockey game happening with this jewel. And then, okay, there's the cap. I use a Rodico to take the cap off the jewel, and then I'm going to clean the cap off on this jewel. So we'll just speed this up so it doesn't take forever. Now I put a drop of oil on the inside of that cap jewel, just like that, and then I just move the cap jewel over to the setting and slide that into the setting. And the setting has a jewel in it as well. It's very fine jewel because this is a very fine watch. I suspect the jewel size is probably 0.08 millimeters, or there around 0.08. The tricky part here is once you've got oil on this thing, it tends to stick to everything. So it's pretty tricky to move that cap jewel in place, but doable. Once I get that in place, then I move the whole unit back up to the watch movement to put that back into the movement. So there we go, done, oiled and dusted. Now I've got the movement nicely operating. Do this job with the movement running. It's a lot easier because the pivot for the balance will find the jewel hole a lot easier by doing it this way. And I've got the cage moved out of the way, and there's two arms to that cage that hold this down. So the other thing you don't want to do is accidentally drop this jewel into where the balance is, because then you're going to have a hard time getting it out. It's likely going to split, and it's lubricated, and then it's going to have you're going to have a very difficult time trying to find that jewel in there. I'm speaking from experience from years ago. I haven't done that in a long time, but holding this with your tweezers is very difficult. It takes a lot of practice and years of doing it to make sure that you don't squeeze those tweezers too hard. So here I'm using a Bergeron stick. There's a flat end to it and a pointy end to it. The flat end is great for just holding down that cage and the jewel while you're taking those little arms and tucking them in. And without that flat part of that stick, you'd be shit out of luck. The thing would probably pop out. And that's the Bergeron. What is it? What's the number on that thing? It's a 7010. So it's the Bergeron 7010. So now I've got the same problem with the other side. I've got the same cap jewel that I've got to deal with, and I just use the stick again to hold the unit down while I remove the arms of this this Inca block cage. So and they rotate up, so they're pretty handy actually. There's the ones that are like 3 tabs that you have to actually use a tool to rotate to get out. Those are very difficult. I don't like those at all. These ones here are not too bad because you just open the door and then it exposes the jewel and the setting, and away you go. So no problem there whatsoever. So here you can see shadows of me doing things in the back, but here I'm just going to grab that jewel again, and it's setting. Yeah, I think that's what I'm up to. Yeah, no, in this case I was actually trying to just grab the cap jewel off to see if I could actually just get the cap jewel. Guess what though? It gave me the whole thing again. So my adventure work. So once again, I've got the cap jewel and the jewel setting kind of stuck together, and I've got to take the two and separate them. You can do this with a very fine screwdriver, or you can use just another piece of Rodico to grab the cap and just take it off of the setting. So this was the best option for me in this case here, and it was pretty easy to do. There we go. So then now I've got the cap jewel out of the setting, so all I need to do is oil this and put it back. So a little sped up for you so you don't get bored. So I'm just cleaning the jewel with that piece of pegwood, getting that in decent shape. And here I'm going to just apply some oil to it, and away we go. In this case, I just put the oil onto the setting as opposed to the putting it onto the cap jewel. I think it probably ends up being the same result. So here we go, and I know the watchmakers out there will be angry at me saying that, but you know, whatever. So here I'm just taking that cage and putting it back. It's what I'd like to call the Nicholas cage. Let's call that the Nicholas cage. So I'm just moving that back into place, and again, this Tudor is a very high-end movement. Tudor is a company owned by Rolex and for forever, I believe, and they make very good watches. So this is a lady's watch. It's super small and was super difficult to work on, but again, the main problem with this watch was that the hairspring was bent out of shape. I made a couple of other videos on how I dealt with that hairspring, and thanks a lot for all of the thanks and the back patting I got for doing that job. So there we go. So the jewel's back in place, the cage is back in place, and that puts a little bit of pressure on that cap jewel, but it also allows it to move under shock. So it's the shock absorbing Inca block technique. So there's the watch running again. In case you don't believe me, look at that thing go. So that hairspring did a great job. So here I'm just taking a picture of it in slow motion to see what my amplitude is and see that I'm still running it at a good amplitude. I do that a lot, and I recommend doing that with your iPhone. Just put it in slow motion mode, hit zoom, like finger up the zoom, and then take a video of it. And you can tell exactly what the amplitude of the watch is by doing that, as opposed to continuously having to put it on your time grapher. So that was done. Now I'm going to take the rotor mechanism here, and this is the mechanism that transfers in both directions. The rotor, whether it swings clockwise or counterclockwise, it'll translate that energy to the mainspring through this gearing mechanism. So I think these mechanisms were first invented by Seiko Corporation, not Rolex. I think Seiko first invented these, but Rolex has their version of one, and here it is. So I'm putting a bit of oil on the on the pivots here, and just to get it working smoothly. And now I've got to locate where to place this, the mechanism, and I just look for the holes first on the movement, and then I look for the holes on that plate with the gears, and I try to get it as close as possible, eyeballing it while I do it. And I don't want to get my tweezers near the hairspring on this watch, so what I end up doing here is just coaxing it in and dropping it down, and then I just move it around and shift it around a bit until it finds home. So I can see by looking at the top that the screw there on the top, the screw hole would not be lined up properly. And so I do that, line that up properly, and then install the screws on the watch. Now that I've nudged this thing forward into place, I just have to get the screws in the holes. Again, first I oil some of the pivots here, the jewels with the pivots sticking out for these gears. And then I need to make sure that when I put these screws in, again, don't drop them into the watch movement, or else you're going to have trouble. So I'm very careful to do this. And when I use a screwdriver here, one technique that's very good is to actually take a set of tweezers and use the tweezers to stabilize the screw while you're using the screwdriver. So I saw that years ago, I think, and when you've got a little small screw like that, it works well. Now I put the screw in, but not tightening it completely until I'm sure that this thing is down nicely. And again, I rotated the watch movement again to get myself in position to actually tighten the second screw here and make sure that's all running well, or in there well. So now I've got the gearing mechanism in here, and that's the rotor would power these gears in place. And now I just simply have to tighten this thing down and finalize it. Yeah, there we go. So now I'm getting the screws tightened down here. And again, I'm very cautious when I do this to make sure I don't have a pivot problem or something sticking out that's not sticking out, or the gears aren't meshing properly or something like that. So there we go, that's done. Here I've got the rotor. So that rotor also has bearings inside the rotor, little tiny ball bearings. And I just use a piece of Rodico to pick up any dust that might be left over after cleaning and just sitting around, right? So it doesn't hurt to use Rodico, because every now and then you see like a piece of thread or something and you go, where did that come from? So you want kind of a clean room perspective when you're doing watch repair, right? You got to have a bit of a clean room like they would have at NASA to do this work. A little piece of dust can stop a watch. So here I'm just cleaning out the ball bearings that are inside this rotor, and now I'm going to oil them a little bit, just a bit, and I don't need to oil each one of the ball bearings. I just need to oil on two sides and then spin the gear in there just to make sure it spins nicely, or the bearing to make sure it spins nicely. And I use a piece of pegwood to do that, the piece of pegwood I had before. And you just stick the piece of pegwood into the hole of the rotor there where the bearings are, and you rotate it. And you'll see how this works here. Just stick that piece of pegwood in, and there's enough friction with the pegwood that it doesn't slide around, and you get to move those bearings around nicely, so they're nicely lubricated. So those move very nicely, so the watch the winding mechanism will work really well with that. And that's a weighted rotor from Tudor, or Rolex company. Here I'm just examining the movement again to make sure everything is in order, just having a look at everything. And I've got to put the watch face on, and there's these two rotating locks that need to be taken out of the way, and then allow the face to drop down. And this is what I'm looking for here. Now I'm putting the hour wheel back on the watch here, and it's got a separator here to support pushing that hour wheel down, and now I'm just trying to line up this watch properly. So trying to find out where these jobby thingamajobby doohickeys are that actually will lock this in. At the same time I'm doing this, I'm trying not to touch the hairspring, because that could cause a real problem if I touch the the balance itself or the hairspring, and it could ruin all the work I had done. So you really have to be very aware of this, how it works. So now I'm looking at the dial feet and where they are on the watch, and making sure the dial feet line up properly. And the dial feet are in a position to allow the calendar date to show through. I don't think there's a way of screwing this thing up. You just have to make sure it's on the correct side, and that would be the side where the hole is that accepts the stem of the watch. So here I'm looking for the dial feet holding mechanisms, and you just push those inward, and they all lock in nicely, and there's no issue. There we go. So that's in there nicely. And then I've got my finger too close to the hands. That's why the hands stopped. Push that one in as well, and those dial feet aren't going to go anywhere. Here I'm just fitting the case on top to make sure it all looks good before I put the hands in. So just doing a bit of case fitting. Now to get the hands on properly, I do have a professional hand pusher. So you put the hour hand on first, and it really doesn't matter where it's sitting when you put it on, because you're going to use the watch crown and stem to move that hand to the 12 o'clock position. So here we go. I can press that straight down, and that it's a movement holder that the watch is now in. And the system I have has movement holders for all different size watches. So it's pretty good that way. So here we go. I'm pushing that down and make sure it's down far enough so the minute hand will go in without an issue. Here I'm just rotating the hour hand around and making sure it's in position to accept the minute hand. So just rotate the hour hand in position. So I had to press a little button to get that stem back in, and you'd see that on the movement on the other side of the movement. So I just put that as close to 12 o'clock as I can get with my eyeball, and I've got a pretty good eyeball, so I got that thing right exactly at 12 o'clock. So I just move that a little bit more. Come on, move it a bit more. Oh yeah, there we go. 12 o'clock high. It looks like it's, no, there we go. So now I placed the minute hand now, and I had to use a different pusher, and then I can push that down. You'll see that being pushed down. There we go. And this is a very precise way of doing it. Any other way, by using hand pushers, would likely not turn out that good. So your best option is to go and buy yourself a professional hand pusher. And I've got a little a picture of that hand pusher in a second that you're going to see. So it's got 4 attachments. I use the steel ones for these, but it also has the plastic ones that can be used a little easier on the hands, I guess. But there's no scratches from this. So there we go. There's the Tudor sitting there, and I'm grabbing right now. I'm just having a look at the second hand, because now I've got to place that second hand on the pipe. And this is where the hand pushers really come in handy. So I can put that second hand on the top and just rest it over the pivot, and the pipe fits over the pivot. And I've had to actually reduce the size of that pipe before, and I've had to do a lot of different work over the years on either the pocket watch second hand or watch second hands. But you can ream them bigger, and you can actually compress them smaller. So here, you put it on the edge and just nudge it over until it's in. And now I use the hand pusher. So one of the 4 hand pushers is in fact a blank, so there's no hole in it. So I can push straight down on this, and you'll see there's the hand pushers I have there. I bought those in China, but they're very high quality. They're highly recommended, and they're probably as good as the ones that are $700 Bergerons. So I think this cost me $250 for this, I believe. And so there it is, and there's the movement fitting in this movement holder. And the movement holder, the value, if you see that center coil, the value is that presses against the back end, so you don't get pressure from pushing on the other side and the other plate. So there's the watch running nicely, keeping time, and what a great feeling it is when you see a watch like this moving again. It's just unmatched as a watchmaker to see an old watch like this back in operation after it had such a tangled hairspring. So I hope you agree with me. Now I'm just casing it, So I'm putting it down like this, and I'll keep it like this and then rotate the whole case holder. It's a gel holder that I have from Bergeron. So there, I rotate the whole thing around. And now I'm just looking at it from the back end, make sure everything is in place. And I've got to now put the tabs back in. So this watch has a retaining ring, and that retaining ring holds the movement in place, and the tabs go over the top of that retaining ring. So I'm making sure that the retaining ring is aligned properly with the opening to support the stem. The stem has to go over that retaining ring, but not touch the retaining ring. So that's how you put this particular Tudor watch together. So I'm making sure it's nicely dropped into place, and I have to play with it just a bit after I get the stem in to get that ring in place. So here on this particular movement, there's a little button that you push down to push the stem in. So you just press it down by the crown, and it's a 2671 ETA movement. So that gets the stem in place with this watch movement. Now for the tricky part is to get these holding tabs in place. They're on both sides of the movement, and they go under the ring, that retaining ring that I put in earlier. So I use my stick, my Bergeron stick, to guide that into place, and it goes over that ring and underneath a lip in the actual watch movement. And so I do that, and then I get that screw in place, and of course there we go, I actually flick that screw. That's because I'm using the very fine tweezers and not the ones I usually use, the brass ones. So I just pick that up with a piece of Rodico and then put that in place nice and easy, and then I'm able to screw that down. So I'll screw this one down first, and then I'll screw the next one down after. So this is this sort of thing is the stuff that racks your nerves as you're doing it, because one little slip and then the screw takes a ride somewhere. So just be very careful when you're doing that. And I'll get that in place, but not really tight. I'll just put it in to position it to make sure it's good to go, and then get the other one in place, not really tight. Make sure the watch movement is centered, and then I'll tighten them both up after. So there we go. So I'm tightening that just a bit. As you can see, I don't really need to tighten it a lot. And then I'll attack the other one. So here's the other the clip holder, I'll call it. The clips, the retaining clips that keep that movement in place. So there it is there. And I've got to get that clip in the right place, and yeah, there we go. It's a little bit testy here as I approach it. This is not something you can do after you've had a cup of coffee, because you'll for sure make that little screw fly onto your carpet, and then you'll have to get that rare earth magnet to find it. It's the only way to find these screws once they get into your shaggy carpet. So here I'm just trying to turn the screwdriver here and putting no downward pressure on it at all, because it'll just twist on me. So I was successful in doing that. Look, a few turns on that, and there we go. And now I know that's in place. I can tighten that down a bit now. Everything seems to be in order. Tighten that down, the ring's in place, and these clips put some downward pressure on the movement while putting upward pressure on the case ring on the outside. And now I've got to put the rotor on, and that's pretty easy actually. These just fit on top, and you just nudge it over the very small pivot that the bearing goes over, and then once you've nudged that in place, you're ready to put the screw in to tighten the rotor down. And there's the screw for the rotor, and I just put that in place. And you don't have to tighten this, you just have to be snug. You don't have to over tighten it, because if you over tighten it, you could damage the threads, you could damage the actual head of the screw, could come off. Just give it a nice snug tightening. It doesn't have to be tightened too much, because there's no friction against that screw due to the bearing that surrounds it. So I just tighten that down. I use a piece of Rodico to hold that rotor down in place, and so I tighten that now. I can give it another tighten snap to make sure that that's all in place, and then I just move that rotor around to see if I've got some movement here on the rotor, and I do. And look at that, what a great job. Now the rotor's moving nicely and all ready for some final steps here. So I took the old gasket to see if it was reusable, and it wasn't. It was too warped, too old, too crispy. So it had lost its viscosity, if I could use that for rubber. So I found a better gasket for it, which fit absolutely in the slot. So this is a Bergeron 6630 gasket. The diameter was 22.5 for this. I looked in my box of gaskets and other things, and I found my box of Bergeron gaskets, and I found the absolute perfect gasket. So what I did here is I put it in one side, and then I pushed down on it and rode the gasket all around that track. It fit absolutely perfect into this spacing, with just enough gasket sticking out to provide a good seal to keep moisture out of this watch. So it is a diving watch. Although it's an older diving watch, I probably will tell the owner not to go diving with this watch or swimming, because it's a vintage collector's watch, and there's no intent to get this back to its original brand new diver status, although you probably could use it as a diver even now. So you'd have to seal test it and everything else. So here I'm just examining all of this to make sure it's good. I'm just securing that stem in a little further. It wasn't in all the way the first time, so now I've got that stem nicely secured, and I just need to put the case back in. The threads on the screw down crown are actually in really good shape, and so is the spring on this crown, so it's pretty good. And there we go. The watch is almost ready, almost complete. So now I'm winding it a bit to see that the winding mechanisms work, and they do. And this is an automatic watch, so the rotor will wind it. So I just put the case back down like this, and you just use your fingers to rotate that case. Now you can see how small this watch is. This is a lady's Tudor watch, very tricky to work on because of its size. And I know other watchmakers out there are telling me that this watch is a lot smaller. Well, I don't have the patience for watches smaller than this. That'll cause my heart to palpitate. So I've got the watch running nicely right now, all good and all ready to be sent back to the owner. I'm just checking the date function, make sure that works perfectly, and it does. And I just pull it out a bit more and check the time setting function, and that works perfectly. And the time setting function will also hold the second hand in place. And so when I push down again, that second hand should move. So I'm just rotating it, and it's actually functioning very nicely. There's good separation between the hands, and using my hand pusher would cause those to go on absolutely horizontal. So there, push that down, and there we go. Second hand's running again. So you've got a brand new watch. I allow the vintage look. I don't take scratches off of the dial, because I've heard from watchmakers to make them continue to look vintage. They want to keep those scratches, because those scratches are memories, events that they've had in their life, and why make the watch look brand new again when it's not? Thanks a lot for watching, and please subscribe.